Hello, and welcome to Rule of Carnage. This is where myself, Glenn Ford, a games designer and developer, has a chat with this guy, Mike Hutchinson, also a splendid game designer and developer, and we talk about how to design better miniatures games. So today we're going to talk about a subject, or a couple of subjects that I think are interrelated, that might end up being a little bit esoteric, might be a sort of a bit of a big idea thing, but we'll see. I think there are places where it gets quite crunchy and involved, and that's synergistic and emergent design in your tabletop game design. So there's a couple of big-ish words. So I'll try and sort of suggest possibly what
define your terms, Glenn.
At least what I mean by them. So I think synergy literally can be best explained as something that is more than the sum of its parts. You put together one, and instead of it making two, it becomes 3 or 4 or 57, depending on how it's sort of combined. And when you put together a set of mechanics within a game, hopefully something synergistic comes out where you create an experience, a play experience that's more than just the rules that were written on the page. And equally, this can be seen where you offer players list building and piloting opportunities, and we'll get into that in a minute, where they can create something synergistic on the tabletop out of the parts you've given them. Emergent elements are things that when you put together one and one, something that wouldn't have been predicted comes out from that combination. And I think it's slightly different from synergy as a concept, because I think synergy is where you, and we're like, this is where the conversation I think is sort of going to start. I think that synergy is where I want you to be able to see the cogs and see what's coming and react to it and go, brilliant, that happened, and then that happened to add it up to make this. I think that emergent elements in games are where something happens under the hood of the game and then it throws out something cool and cinematic that wasn't instantly obvious on the tabletop. So an emergent moment in your game is where, some dice get rolled and some numbers get added up, and the result is something explodes at exactly the right moment, and it's really cool in a cinematic moment, because no set of rules have cinematic moments in them. They're writing on a page that tells you to follow a bunch of instructions and count up some numbers and move some stuff around the tabletop. There's no cinematography in that. There's no real narrative in the rules. When you engage with those rules, make them happen on the tabletop, and something occurs that is narrative, that is cinematic, that narrative and cinematic element was emergent from those rules. It wasn't contained in them in the way that the rules said, roll a dice, if this happens, do that. That was contained in the rules. That being cool and telling a story wasn't contained in the rules. That was emergent. Do you think those are sort of coming towards being fair definitions of the terms, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. I think like in video games, you've got like the difference between emergent gameplay, where simple stuff, you give the players simple things and like complicated solutions to your levels come out of that. And then you've got emergent narrative, where it's like, like a classic sort of like a sandbox game, where it's like, I'm just gonna create my own story by interacting with the elements that you've given me, but I'm not necessarily going to be railroaded down a story path. And I think, and tabletop games are good at both of those things when you build them in, particularly tabletop miniature games, because of the analog placement of the miniatures and stuff. Like, there's a lot of flexibility, and our obsession with randomness, like those two things come together to allow both narrative emergence and gameplay emergence, or complexity emergence. And I guess you placing that emergence next to synergy makes me try and like really want to find out why that is different. And it's different in my brain for sure, in terms of like the stage that I'm working on those problems as a design challenge. Like synergy, the clicking like interlocking machine of the puzzle that the game represents, like that for me is a sort of later stage design challenge, whereas the emergence, like when I throw the game down on the table, does it land on its legs, and does it do a cinematic pirouette, more times than it doesn't? Like that's for me like an earlier stage of the game design. And so I'm not certain I can crisply define those two, but like my feeling is that one is about giving a mechanical set of deliberately arranged puzzle pieces, and the other is about making sure that the sort of heart of the game is right for what you're trying to evoke in the imagination of the player.
Yeah, and I think that's why I've tried to sort of chosen to tackle these two sort of phrases simultaneously, because I'm quite often not totally certain where the dividing line is in design. I think it's sort of like, I mean, take for example in Gaslands, where you've got a team like Slime. There are synergistic elements where you go, okay, if someone takes this perk and that perk, they will combine and make you better at doing this thing, which you get a reward for. And there's a little path for people, and it's like, okay, this perk's cool for everybody, but for Slime, it makes her better at doing the thing that gets her rewards. And so it's not just good at what it is, it's double good because of who she is. I think that's sort of synergistic moment, that when you do that on the tabletop, it is cool and makes you look badass. And sometimes you do it, when there's 1,000 sort of different puzzle pieces around and you get to ping pong around and look cool. That is emergent to my mind. That's sort of partly where the dividing line is. And I think it's worthwhile, because I think that a game with quite synergistic and emergent designs allow for a sort of potentially exponential learning curve and sort of complexity within the game. If you've got a quite sort of controlled design that has a sort of linear sort of learning track, then it tends to have a relatively low ceiling. People understand all the bits of the game relatively early. The game can get solved quite swiftly. Whereas I think if you can put in some emergent and synergistic elements, particularly, as you're saying, in the sort of non-discrete analog style games we're talking about, you can have a game that continues to force people to develop new heuristics and new ways of playing, and it can have this sort of more growing sort of exponential sort of learning curve, where a player will find a new exploit and the other player will react to it, and they will sort of feed off each other. I think that's one of the things that I like about the idea of synergistic design.
You mentioned it at the beginning about how one is about sort of list building and piloting more than the other. I wonder if in fact they're sort of the same thing, but synergy is about the tools that you provide to the players outside of the tabletop experience, and that emergence is what happens when you're actually rolling dice at the table. Because the synergy, the definition of synergy that we're sort of messing around here, where it's like you bring together 2 or 3 elements from different parts of the rule book, as it were, and like they're not nestled next to each other, and they don't say, well, do this and combine it with this and you'll get a lovely potion of swift strength. What that sort of represents is the meta game or the armchair game, where you're like, okay, I can see how this is influencing this resource in the system. This is another way of manipulating that resource, and those two things fit together really interestingly. But then at the table, it's about, well, I had a crazy idea for how to make these things come together and be something better, and then could I make that happen on the table? And that's the sort of piloting element of it. But I don't know whether the design challenge as the designer of that game is to think first about, am I laying enough interesting puzzle pieces around?
Well, I think where this becomes a sort of practically useful thing for designing, God forbid, is that I think that part of balancing your game, particularly if it's a game that has costing and pricing for the abilities that you're giving players characters, is that synergistic design allows you to price in piloting skill on a weapon or a ability or whatever it happens to be. And I think it's an important part, therefore, of balancing the game. Where for
So
myself,
tell the people at home what you mean by that, because I think I know what you mean by that, but tell us what you
okay,
mean. Pricing
so
in piloting skill.
yeah, so for example, for myself, if there's a gun that just shoots a big bullet and does a lot of damage and hurts somebody, then it's priced highly and in a very linear fashion with other guns. If this gun does twice as much damage as that gun, it costs twice as much. Or if it shoots twice as far, or if it's twice,
A
it's a very
big gun, 10 points. That's a lot of points, but it always
yeah.
does its thing and it always shoots its big gun bullet.
Yeah, and fundamentally, if everybody just buys those guns and then lines up those armies and then shoots at each other, things will come out fairly evenly. And I also think that if I'm giving you a gun where what you have to do to use it on the tabletop is put down a model and then choose to make it shoot, I'm going to really cost that thing quite highly. Whereas if I give you a gun that is pretty much garbage, unless you're in a particular place or the enemy is in a particular place. If I give you a gun that moves a model half an inch, and it's pretty much useless unless that model is on a high building or a bridge. And then I give you,
so it's the rubber bullet gun that just like bounces them a little bit.
Yeah, and so I can make that gun really, really cheap because 99% of the time it's total garbage. And if I give you that gun, and then if I also give this
or it's not 99% of the time, it's like in the wrong situation, and many situations will be the wrong situation, it doesn't do anything.
Well,
or it does less.
In 99% of the time, if you just allow things to occur the way that they're going to occur naturally during a game, and you're going to let people do what they want to do and your opponent do what he wants to do, that gun will almost always be more or less useless. But if I give you that gun and then I also give you a siren song, which works to get people to go onto bridges, or a river creating ability where you create a river and then pontoons pop on it. So the one ability can be quite cheap and the other ability can be quite cheap, and they will only be useful if I put them together and I lure you onto a bridge and then I rubber bullet you and I get an instant kill because you were on the bridge and you fell off and you drowned. And at that point, the rubber bullet gun can be way more effective than the big shooty gun and way cheaper than the big shooty gun because I've required you to pilot the rubber bullet gun to get the best usage out of it. And then I can start balancing in things. If I am requiring you to pay piloting skill, I can therefore not charge you list building points as harshly as if I'm not requiring any piloting skill from you. If I give you a thing that just pilots itself and just is good and you put it down and it smushes things, then I can make that expensive. And if I give you a thing where you have to, frankly, be smart and plan and play for it, I can make that much cheaper. And I think that's one of the ways that, and for me, that's part of the difference between synergy and emergence, because I want you to see the cogs when I'm putting something synergistic into the game. I want you to know that there are opportunities here, and I want you to plan to try and take advantage of those opportunities. When I put in something emergent, I don't want you to see it coming. I want you to be playing the game and doing things and thinking, oh, this is fun and this is cool. And the emergent thing happens and you go, that was brilliant. It's the, once or twice I've been sort of demoing games for people and somebody has taken a moment and gone, oh, I saw what you did there. Oh, that was lovely. That was delightful. I didn't see that coming, but now that it's occurred, bravo. And I think for me that's the difference. For me, emergent is more sort of under the hood, and synergistic is I want you to see, and I want you sometimes to go, you know what, I'm not going to buy the rubber bullet gun. I can see how hard it was going to be to make the rubber bullet gun pay off. I'm going to take the, and you don't have to be an idiot to take the big gun. I will price it in a way that is fair and reasonable, and that sometimes the work for using the rubber bullet gun is not going to come out, but it gives you the opportunity to go, Okay, yeah, but I can buy 10 rubber bullet guns for your one big gun, so I can start using them in an interesting way.
So shall we? I think that gives us some fairly decent working definitions of these. So shall we move on to talking about how you might, like, how do you come up with these things? How do you put them in your game? Like, what are you looking for? So I mean, from my point of view, I think, like I said before, I think there's a sequence to these things, and I'm always looking for emergence before I'm looking for synergy. Um, and so I think, like, for me, I because the way that I design games is fairly cinematic. Like, I'm inspired by movies and video games, and I want to recreate that sort of sensation of experiencing that movie or that video game. I'm always looking for the alchemy that is, okay, if I add a couple of mechanics, in a couple of rules into this game, is it possible for those to spin out funny little moments which feel right? So is it possible for this game to so a classic example is in A Billion Suns, where, like, there's a rule that probably shouldn't be there, which is the jump shock rule, where you jump a ship in and it causes like a gravitational wave that can do damage to ships nearby. But, like, there's a very specific reason why that rule is in there, and it's because I want to create the effect of, like, a ship jumping in to a battle in the middle of the chaos and, like, smashing some other smaller ships out of the way. And I don't think it's a completely effective implementation of that desire for that emergent sort of moments to happen. But, like, it's a very deliberate, here's the feeling I want, so I'm going to put a rule in that tries to do that without just going straight to the end of that and just going, like, every time you jump in a ship, it automatically can ram another ship. And so instead of having ships ramming other ships, I'm trying to, like, abstract it one click back to be like, here's a thing that happens generically, or an aura effect, or something that is just a little bit less specific and more flexible, so that it can manifest in slightly different ways in different circumstances. The other example that really springs to mind is the flip rule in Gaslands, where simply the fact that sometimes unexpectedly cars will make a fairly significant move forward in the wipeout step, like, that has loads of knock-on effects, but the actual impact on the game is really unpredictable and really dependent on the circumstances, where the other cars are, where the terrain is, which direction the car that's about to flip is going to go in, because if it's pointing towards the next race gate, then that's a brilliant move, and if it's pointing the wrong way, it could go straight off the table. And so, like, there's this massive variance of possible outcomes, and some of them are very unexpected, or rather they're quite an alarmingly sharp change in the game state, which for Gaslands works because it's a game about things suddenly exploding and going all over the place. And so, like, that sharp change in game state as an emergent property of having this rule in is fine. But I guess in both of those cases, what I'm doing is I'm not saying, here's the specific rule for when you hit a rock and you go up on one wheel and you slide and you can go through, like, a thin thing, and as long as there's not anything on this side, then you can go, like, that's way too specific. What I'm just saying is, okay, let's abstract that back to, you make a move, you ignore everything, and then you have to headcanon in the rest of the reasons for, like, what happened. Did they go under? Did they go over? Were they spinning in the air? Did they just miss? And so I think that's a really successful example of, like, building a rule that causes emergence really naturally in the game. And the gravity wave jump shock thing is a less successful example of that, because you jump the ships in and it causes some damage to go on the ships, but nothing else happens. So very occasionally that point of damage, or those 2 points of damage, is enough to destroy a ship. It doesn't happen that often, and so, like, it doesn't have the sort of instant or sharp change in game state, which I think makes that thing actually emergent in Gaslands. It's like, it's not enough. It needed to be dialed up for me to have the impact that in fact I wanted to do. And also it's really fiddly to measure, and it quite often does things that you don't expect when you forget about it and jump your own ships and squash all your own stuff. And it's just like, there was enough things to worry about when deploying your ships than to avoid your own jump shock.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things, you know, it's nice to reflect on a piece of attempted emergent design that didn't go frankly perfectly in relation to jump shock. And I think one of the things about emergent design is it requires a lot of a certain number of interacting systems to be around about the same place, and not necessarily like named as being this or being that, but just this happens when that happens, that happens when that happens.
And I think that's actually one of the things that I really enjoyed exploring is, like, I think it's fair to say that some people regard my games as quite gamey, and like people talk about Car Wars and Gaslands as being like simulation and game, and I'm delighted and happy with that. But I think that's partly because I don't call things simulation-isty things. I give them a sort of flavor, but then I let them be their own game logic, and then that game logic can take on its own narrative emergence depending on the circumstance. And I think that for me is how I'm going to continue to approach this problem, because I don't want to sandbox in those things. I want to give them enough elbow room to sort of spread themselves, and as the moment in these analog interactions of miniatures on the table, as the moment it emerges from like, well, was this soldier behind a wall or behind a window or peeking through the window or on top of a tank? Because like the same sort of knockback effect might tell three very, very different stories depending on which side of the wall you're currently standing, or whether you're on top of something.
Yeah, and I think that is the thing with jump shock. And I think that there was a point in A Billion Suns where there were a few more, like, there was conversations at least about some gravitational effects and gravity wells, and there was a possibility of there being you know, line of sight blocking abilities for like planets and suns, and the rest of them dropped out, and jump shock was still in there because it was still something that was part of one of the original visions of the game.
Yeah, it was really important to me. I just couldn't see that it wasn't working.
At that point, it was a jigsaw piece that had no other pieces to click into, and it's sort of still there, and the cog's spinning, but nothing's meshing with it. Whereas in Gaslands, everything meshes with something flipping and blowing up. Everything is built around when something blows up, this happens, and it knocks onto that, and it knocks onto that, and it knocks onto that, and it creates more flips and more, and so the whole game is waiting for you to flip and blow up.
Actually, and this might be an intriguing result of A Billion Suns, like, doesn't have list design, or you do list design at the table, but there is actually wrapped up in, as you were describing jump shock as a jigsaw piece that doesn't have any, like, it does click into some other systems. Particularly it clicks into the mass system. So ships in A Billion Suns have different classes, and I've basically blocked those into mass 0, mass 1, mass 2, mass 3 to sort of show the big divisions of ship bigness. And when you jump something in, if it's bigger in mass than the other things in its vicinity, then it does this jump shock. And so there's a piece of synergy that sort of emerges at the playing table there, which is you need to think carefully about the composition of the forces you're about to deploy, and the sequence in which you deploy them. And because you're probably also thinking about another fiddly mechanic called Mother's Wing and another fiddly mechanic called Combined Orders. And by slotting all of those pieces just right, you end up going, blam, here's an indestructible collection of things that cover each other's weaknesses, which can't be shot from long or short range, which, you know, blah, 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 blah. And like that ball of death is something that you created using the synergies that are available to you, but you did it in the moment because A Billion Suns doesn't have pre-planning.
Well, I think the thing about A Billion Suns is that a lot of the emergent parts of A Billion Suns actually comes from the contract system, where a bunch of different contracts lock together, and then you've got a story on the tabletop where, you know, there are these facilities, and the facilities are there because this is where the space krakens are, and they're trying to escape the space krakens that have gone mad. And so we've got, you know, that's where a lot of the emergent moments, I think, happen in A Billion Suns, rather than it being from chaotic reactions to things happening to spaceships. I mean,
yeah, and that's something that, like, as I'm writing Hobgoblin, as I'm returning to, you know, the world of mass fantasy battles, like quite often that stuff is provided at the front as a piece of scenario design, where it's like, outside the city gates, the, you know, the last defenders of the city are now, you know, facing the onward hordes, and here's the chapel that needs to be defended, and like all of that stuff is sort of laid out for you as part of the setup. And personally speaking, I think that that's ultimately less satisfying than a world where you procedurally generate some stuff. I think I was talking about it. Adeptus Titanicus has a simple system for this, where you procedurally generate some missions, and you're like, oh well, oh, okay, it seems like I've got a crew member that I need to go and rescue over there, and you're trying to hold that part whilst like get into my backfield, and we have to come up with a reason why we're both rushing past each other despite the fact that we're supposed to be sworn enemies. And that, like, that it's not required of you, but like the fact that there's some randomness and the game has thrown those things down at random, which is a bit like the process versus game we were talking about before, but like this process has thrown out some random elements that, if you are the kind of person who needs a narrative to hold that together, at least in your mind's eye, then you've got to make the connections there, and therefore the narrative will be created by you at the table. It will be emergent from the random results that have happened. And I think that that's partly maybe why when we were both being I think a bit sort of thoughtful about random tables which generate sort of story, I think maybe this is why, or this is a more useful distinction, which is we don't necessarily want to write tables that tell you here's the little chunk of story that comes out. We want to write things that are like physical events or interactions, and then let you draw the lines between the dots to figure out what's going on for your force, for your character, in your mind.
Yeah, I mean, personally, something that always puts my back up is when I'm looking for a game and it's got like a profile, and it says this person has the ability athlete, and because they have the ability athlete, they get this, and that, and you can buy athlete for this person, and that's what you're going to have. That really, but what I want you to let me buy those things and call that person an athlete if that's what I want to do.
Right, you want to see it the other way around. You want to be like,
yeah,
well, do they have like, are they fleet of foot, and have they got like good balance or something? And those two things, when you put them together, you're like, wow, this is an athlete, rather than being told it's an athlete and getting those two things.
Yeah, and I don't like being told that what this ability means is that person is an athlete.
Do you not like character classes in role-playing games then?
Well, yeah, and you know, I don't like the idea that it's like the things that they have to be because they are an athlete. I want to imagine 1,000,001 reasons why they have these abilities and skills other than they're a track team member, and I want to be able to build my athlete out of my parts, and then I want there to be
okay, so that's actually more a naming question than anything.
Yeah, but the point I think is that if you give me 5 like profiles that have a set of abilities, and one makes me an athlete and one makes me the bruiser and one makes me something else, whereas instead if you just dump all the bits that are in those profiles on the table in a lump, price them all, and then go build away, I can make more than 5 people. I can make 100, I can make 1,000,000 people by combining them and going, well, you know, this guy is a ballet dancer but who does karate, or whatever it happens to be.
I've been reading this. I think this is still relevant, even though we're sort of returning to that. Like, for one reason or another, I was reading the D100 tables from both Kingdom Death and the old Warhammer Quest, and they are actually really similar. Like, in this exercise of reading those two rule books, I've realized just how in love with Warhammer Quest Kingdom Death is, and even when you say the two words together, they have a similar rhythm to them. But they've got this, I think Kingdom Death definitely does a better job of it. The ones in the Warhammer Quest roleplay book, like, they're really specific little. They're almost like pages in a fighting fantasy novel. Like they're really quite specific. Like a specific thing happens to your little band of warriors. Like they meet a goblin who is wearing red shoes, does have a bag of gold, and then you chase him and he does drop it. Rather than, I think what you're reaching for, which is like something like you meet a malevolent figure and you end up with some gold. Like, tell me why. But I'm not going to tell you why. I'm just going to tell you that that's what happened. And as you're writing these emergent game mechanics, I think that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to write like you meet a mysterious figure and then you end up with some gold, you fill in the blanks, rather than writing a table which is like, you know, when you get shot, roll on this table, you will find out which engine gets hit and what the like increase in radioactive temperature in that location then becomes, and then that you can cross-reference on another thing that will tell you what happens to that. Like that's all too specific. Like tell me, like does this make me change direction or slow down or speed up or lose an ability that I previously had, and then I'll fill in the blanks.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, you know, yeah, tracking back to what you started saying about how to actually write some of these in a game. I think that this is a place where it's important to have a clearly set out sort of design principles and design documents, and particularly
we've said that before, actually.
I think we've mentioned it once or twice, but it's very important to have a sort of, okay, this is where this thing is meant to be going, and something that a signpost you can refer to. It puts me in mind sometimes of Peter Jackson directing Lord of the Rings. On his commentary, if you happen to listen to such things, talks constantly about the fact that the story was going to a certain point, and that's Frodo on Mount Doom. And so we filmed it, and then what you have to do is you have to pull out everything that doesn't service Frodo heading towards Mount Doom, that doesn't tell you about why he's heading to Mount Doom, or how he feels about heading to Mount Doom, or what's at stake because he's heading to Mount Doom. And there's amazing scenes of, you know, the Gondorians on the walls, you know, and poor Sean Bean lost his huge, you know, rallying speech that he made, because it was brilliant. It was a great scene, but it had nothing to do with Frodo. And I think you need these design principles, because you need to be able to say, okay, that's what I'm aiming for. That's Frodo on Mount Doom. Here's a bunch of rules, and some of these rules I love. Some of these rules are my absolute baby, but they don't point towards my final point, and so they have to be, you know, binned out. And I think that those points can still emerge. It's like the thing that
so to give a specific example of that, like we were talking before about morale and, you know, psychology and so forth, and I'm writing a mass battle game, and we talked about how important it was to have that moment where the armies begin to crumble, and it's very classic in Warhammer and other games to have people retreating. And so as I'm working on Hobgoblin, I'm exploring, well, is it nice to have units running away, and when they run away, do they get taken off, or do they actually like scamper back so that they can turn around and affect the game later? Because having them run away physically and then turn around and affect the game, like that's a real opportunity for stories to emerge, for that like little unit of halberdmen who fails to hold the bridge to then come back and sweep the Chaos Warriors off from the flank later on in a heroic action. But I had by that point really clearly established that the point of Hobgoblin was it's a brutally fast game, and all of that stuff that's happening in the backfield is consuming minutes of game time that I don't have spare. Like all of that is like against the principle, even though it might be cool, even though it might have stories emerging from it, it's for a different game. And maybe when I write the Gentleman's massed battle game of leisure, which is played out over 6 weeks with multiple delivery curries throughout, then it will have a much more elaborate system for establishing where the pigeons have gone. But in this game, it was really useful to have gone back to the principles and be able to sweep that, although emergent, not relevant to the sort of thing that was trying to emerge.
Yeah, and I think in relation to where you can, so I mentioned earlier passingly designing slime in in Gaslands. And originally, when Mike sort of presented Slime to me, Slime is the punk, and there were two principles that she had as a punk. One was that she had this mosh pit thing going on where you wanted to bang into people a little but not a lot, and the other thing was that she had tons of friends, just hangers on, hanging off the cars, and so she had this ability where the crew were cheaper. And it was coming to this point of going, okay, well, what is she? Is she the person? Because having this thing where cars slam into each other a lot has nothing to do. It's in Gaslands
because mechanically the only thing that crew members do is give you more attacks when you're shooting. They don't allow you to stab and punch, weirdly. Like maybe that's a thing to fix, but yeah, the two things were there were no interactions between those two things.
Yeah, and there was no way of giving people the ability to synergize with one of those abilities without completely losing the other ability. And so ultimately one of those abilities had to go. One of them was useless because she kind of had a sort of fire and ice thing going on, and it's like, we want people to build to something, and that's when one of them had to go, and it ended up being the crew member, and that ended up going into Scarlet.
Yes. I like both bacon and chocolate, but they don't need to be in the same sandwich.
Yeah, and so I think you can learn as you build a sort of a set of synergistic concerns that you were wrong about the things you tried to throw in there. But yeah,
it's worth saying, gentle listener, that the first time I wrote the Gaslands sponsors system and perks system, like, I realized by working with Glenn how little I knew about this synergy piece, because the way that I play is fairly loosey-goosey in terms of like, in war games I'm looking for that feeling, and I'm not looking for that like killer combo of things that will make an engine click together. So when I came to write it, I just didn't have the tools available to see that stuff through. So I guess what I mean by that is, like, get this wrong, like, it's okay, I think, just to slam down some perks and some army building options and try and figure out whether they're working or whether they're not.
I mean, yeah, I think if you are not a vicious tournament player, and you're writing some sort of faction system in your game, find a friend who is a vicious tournament player, but one who doesn't want to leave in loopholes so that they can smash everybody with game later on. Because I think it's fair. I think you have a tendency to pick the things that you like when you're picking a list, and picking stuff that's cool, and not looking into those puzzles so much. And to a degree, when you wrote Gaslands, you were writing in things you thought were cool, and which
I think is a perfectly good place to start, by the way.
I think you've got to start somewhere. The issue is that in a lot of those early versions, you gave them to me, and I'm a bastard sometimes when it comes to writing game lists, and I went, oh, look at what I can do, look at what I can do, everyone's dead. Oh, look what I can do here, everyone's dead. And it's going to that thing of going, okay, we don't want everyone dead all the time because somebody has just taken a death bus and killed everybody immediately. We do want cool things to happen. We want to give people opportunities.
I think I'm not certain if we talked about this before, but I also I think we talked about it in the meta episode, actually, when we talked about metas. One of the things that I observed you doing was establishing a series of waypoints where it's like, well, obviously you're going to spot this, and then the answer to this synergy is, well, you have to have something that sort of counters that, and then once you've got that, you have to find something that answers that question. And so again, like, knowing a friend who is keen on high level tournament play is invaluable to designing a set of like questions and answers that you can lay out through the synergies in your game, and making sure that you haven't accidentally just made one best thing. You've made a sort of circle of things that answer each other's questions.
Yeah, and I think, again, I think that goes back to a degree what I was saying about the difference between the sort of linear series of heuristics you get without synergistic design, and the more sort of bulgy, weird tree exponential thing you can get with it. Like I said, it was one of my great joys when Gaslands came out, watching different little groups of metas getting to various points, people popping up in forums and going, this thing's horribly broken. Go, I think you're at stage 4.7 of the meta journey. Splendid, good. I record where you're getting to. Don't worry, in a week or two you'll go, oh no, it's not broken at all, it's complete garbage, I do this. And you know, yeah, it's lovely to be able to sort of lay those things in. And I think there's a conversation we keep having again about where you're laying in breadcrumbs and where you're locking up the sweet shop, and where you're sort of leading somebody to discover something in a fun way, and when you're hiding a fun thing under away from them that they might never get to, and why are you hiding the fun? And it's like, well, I'm not hiding the fun, I'm laying out a sort of treasure hunt that we're going to go on a journey together. Ideally, I'm writing this game, I give it to you, and then hopefully you're going to go on a journey and you're going to find the things that I laid out for you, and every time it's going to be like a little unwrapping of a present where you go, this thing clicks, and then you put it on the tabletop. I think what's so worthwhile about emergent design is you never really know until you put it on the tabletop whether your synergistic ideas come together. And a lot of time you have these synergistic ideas, the things that should be brilliant, and you put them on the tabletop and they are garbage. And they, you know, most plans don't survive contact with the enemy, you know. And when people have this idea of a synergistic list build and they put it on the tabletop and they find out it falls complete to pieces, and so they've got to go back to the drawing board and they've got to rewrite it. Oh, I forgot to put this in, and that's why it fell to pieces. I need one of those, so I've got to take out one of them, and I've got to put in the lesser version of the thing that I had before, but I'll make that work. And you go back to the tabletop. Oh, it works a little bit better this time, and you know that hopefully is the relationship someone can end up building with your game, where they come back to it and they go away, and they come back to it and they go away, and that's the sort of thing that makes, you know, the sort of character that makes somebody's relationship with your game extend, rather than just being a sort of one night stand. It becomes a real sort of back and forth.
The other thing I just want to mention is sort of on the other end of the spectrum here. Like, I think one of the things that I love about those moments where something emerges on the table is that it's really directly connected to this sort of desire to play with toy soldiers. And like those moments where, like, the game, like a miniature war game itself is quite it's a funny little activity where you've got a static miniature and you move it across the table in order to sort of replicate it, you know, traveling through this space, and it's already quite narrative in and of itself. But I think that these emergent moments are where you really breathe life into these miniatures, and people sort of, just for the briefest moment, don't, like, the miniature melts away and they just see the cowboy spinning their gun and like shooting the hat off the bad guy or whatever. Like, it's that for me is like, that's what I'm really looking for, is that moment where those miniatures become the story and they just grab your imagination so much. And I suppose that's for me why that's like the sort of the yin and yang that's going on in this conversation here, is like, that's what really fires my imagination. And although I'm delighted that people are delighted about, you know, finding the puzzle and putting it together and absolutely criminally destroying me with it, and then me never really understanding how that how to get to that, or even how to solve it, at least I've got these little animated moments of narrative that I'm like absolutely delighted to have brought into existence. I think I don't think those are at all at odds. I think that they are different expressions of that same moment, where it's like, well, the game leapt up off the table and high-fived me.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not sure how sort of crunchily useful that conversation would have been to people, but to say, consider the places where the bits of your game come together, where the cogs meet, and what they throw out, and what sorts of things are gonna pop out from things which aren't immediately obvious. When you're pricing abilities, consider how hard it is to make them work on the tabletop, not how powerful they can be if they're made to work, but what work needs to be put in to make them work, and consider pricing them appropriately because of that. But
And when you're writing rules and naming rules, make them less specific and more agnostic to the circumstances.
Yeah, give people the opportunity to decide what their story is. They're not telling your story, they're telling their story. You're just giving them the tools to do it. Don't put them on a railroad of your narrative. Try and open it up to them and say, this thing makes this character do X. What that means that character is, that can be up to you. It just makes them do X, and that's all there is to it. Try and offer people toolkits as much as possible.
That might be one of the really critical things that divides board games and role-playing games and puts miniature games in the middle, you know?
Oh no, absolutely. I think it definitely is. For now, though, I think we're going to.
That's quite enough of that, Glenn.
That's quite enough from us for this episode. Thank you for watching, if indeed you still are. If you are, presumably you thought something we did wasn't that terrible, so please like and subscribe.
That's the most British thing you've ever said.
So other than that, look us up on social media. Follow us on the various Twitter spheres and Insta wobbles that are out there. For now, we're going to say goodbye from this episode of Rule of Carnage. So
Bye-bye.
thank you and goodbye. Bye.